All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the 3 days to paid Dubsado Bootcamp. I hope you all are doing fantastic. Hopefully, you were able to get some of the homework done from yesterday's session, getting your settings set up, maybe getting your packages in place, your payment plans. Maybe you practice sending an invoice to yourself. So I hope everyone is doing well. We're going to give just a couple minutes here for people to come in. I also want to make sure that we are streaming on our YouTube channel as well, which it looks like we are. Lovely. So we're going to go ahead and let's see. Okay, that is working. All right, perfect. So what we're going to do here is we're going to walk through a couple housekeeping things just like we did yesterday, just so if maybe this is someone's first time at the webinar or during this boot camp, you kind of have an idea of how the webinar goes. So a couple things here before we get started. Number one is up at the top. If you're in Big Marker, if you click on the handouts tab in the top right, you can download the handout that I'm going to be going through today, just like yesterday. And this will be really great if you want to use this as sort of like a cheat sheet whenever we're done. You can download the handout there. You'll also notice under the handouts that there are a couple of other things that you can download. We'll get to that in just a little bit once we actually dive in. But basically, you're going to be able to download some of the form templates that I'm going to be using during the webinar today. So you'll have kind of a good starting point. So we'll get into more of that later. I won't take too much time on that. How the webinar works is that I'm going to go through all of my notes that I have first. And then once I'm done with that, I'll open it up for questions at the end. So if you have questions that you want to ask me, I'm more than happy to stay on here. We'll usually spend about 15, 20 minutes answering questions at the end. So save all of your questions for the end if you can. And then I'll make sure to go in and answer those once we're all finished today. So what we're going to do here is we're going to jump in and get started. One more thing I want to mention. Usually we have some questions about this. If you are on Big Marker, you can actually get a recording of this. It will be sent out to you usually around 24 hours after the recording is processed. So I believe you all, if you registered, you should have received a recording in your email yesterday. If you're on YouTube, this is going to be on our YouTube channel, so you can always go back and rewatch this. And another thing for our YouTube folks as well, if you want to download the templates from today, they are going to be in the description as well, so you can grab them there. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into today's content. We have some really amazing stuff to get into today, and I think you all are going to really like it. We're going to be building off of what we talked about yesterday. So it is important that if you weren't here yesterday, some of these things might be a little bit foreign because we're kind of building on top of what we covered yesterday, but great stuff nonetheless. So like I said, my name is Cameron. I'm the Director of Education here at Dubsado. And what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about just that 3-day agenda that we started with yesterday, just to kind of give a quick recap and where we're headed. So we talked about a lot yesterday: packages, payment plans, invoicing. Today, we're talking about forms. So we're going to get into the 5 form types. We're going to talk about lead capture forms, getting new projects into Dubsado. We're going to talk about contracts and proposals. And then tomorrow, we're going to talk about putting everything together to send out to your new leads and really go through that client experience part of it. So today's goal, what we're going to be getting into today, we're going to learn the 5 form types. We're going to talk about that first, what the different form types do. Then we're going to talk about getting your lead capture form set up, getting your proposal set up, and getting your contract set up. So we're going to dive into that here. So let's start off with the 5 form types in Dubsado. And if you downloaded the handout, this next slide is going to be really great for you to kind of get a good overview of what the different form types do. So we'll just walk through this really briefly. I won't, deep dive into all of this because we're going to talk about a lot of these later. So the first thing, contracts, they're designed to be signed off on. So like an electronic signature that you want to collect from your client. We'll talk about that today. Sub-agreements are really great for any additional signatures that you need beyond the contract. So if you have any waivers, any photo releases, any non-disclosures, any type of liability waiver, anything along those lines, sub-agreements are really great for that. Questionnaires are going to be basically used for sharing and collecting additional information from your client. These will make a lot more sense once we talk about the lead capture form, but questionnaires are really good to get more information about the project from your client, whether that's a feedback survey that you want to send them when you're done working with them. Maybe there's like a project kickoff survey that you want to get from them, or a way where you can get more info about the project. Proposals, that's going to be the main piece that we talk about today. These are designed to pitch your pricing to a client. So obviously with this boot camp, that's a large piece of what we're going to be getting into. So that's strictly designed for pitching your pricing to your client. And then lead capture forms, this is going to be what we get into next. These are designed to create new projects in Dubsado. We talked about projects yesterday, about how those are the folders for the clients that you're working with. Lead capture forms are designed to get those new projects into Dubsado and get them rolling, so that way you can start communicating with them. So this is just a quick overview. I have some more bullet points here that you can look through once we're done, but this is a really good kind of overview of what the 5 form types are, what they're designed for, and kind of what you can do with them. So 5 form types are right there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to put it in Dubsado terms. So let's jump over to Dubsado here. And where I'm at right now is underneath templates and then forms. So we talked about templates yesterday, all of this stuff over here on the left-hand side. That's where you do a lot of the creating in Dubsado, your content creation. So underneath forms, what you'll notice is that the slide that I had pulled up, this is kind of the exact same look. You have 5 columns across the top, and all of the different base templates that you have are all located here inside of the template section under forms. So we have our contracts, sub-agreements, questionnaires, proposals, and lead capture forms. So before we actually move into lead capture forms, I do want to highlight a couple things about the forms that we're going to be looking at specifically for this bootcamp. Sub-agreements and questionnaires, those 2 forms specifically, we're not going to be going into detail about those 2 forms. The reason why is because our bootcamp goal is surrounded by getting a booking by your client, and questionnaires and sub-agreements don't really fit into that. You don't necessarily need them to get a booking. So we're going to be concentrating on the forms that do lead to you getting a booking. So let's look at one thing here, which is just a reminder of what we are trying to do in our bootcamp. We're trying to zero in on that interest and decision and action level. We talked about kind of those different tiers of a business process yesterday. We're really focusing on interest and decision and action. Now, because those are the 2 things that we're focusing on with our clients, what we actually are going to do is look at the forms that have to do with that. So these are the forms that fit the goal. The lead capture form is the form that's really used at the interest level when someone is saying, hey, I would like to know more about your services or products. Do you want to jump on a phone call? Or, hey, can you send me pricing? The lead capture form is great for the interest level. And then as far as someone making a decision on purchasing your product and taking action on it, that's where proposals and contracts come into play. So again, that's the main reason why those are the 3 forms that we're going to be zeroing in on, and not sub-agreements and questionnaires. So it's not because I want to skip over them, because I could do a whole nother webinar on those, but it's mainly because those don't fit the goal that we're after for this webinar. So with that being said, let's dive into our first form, which is the lead capture form. So lead capture forms, let me actually jump over here. So again, a quick reminder before we actually look at the form, Dubsado is meant to manage and communicate with your clients from the moment they're interested in working with you all the way through you providing that service. So it's important that we're capturing them at that interest level. We talked about that yesterday. So that's really what the lead capture form is designed to do. So we want to make sure that any lead, anyone who says, hey, I want to work with you, I want to find out more information, we want to make sure that a project gets created there. That's really where the lead capture form comes into play. So when I'm in this form section, I'm going to go over to one of my lead capture forms and we're going to click in here. Now, we haven't looked at this yet during the bootcamp as far as building forms, but just a quick rundown here. What you can do to build or how you can build a form in Dubsado is by using what we like to call form elements. And the elements are over here on the left-hand side. Basically, they're different ways that you can display information, collect information from your client, and you can build these forms to basically look how you want them to. We'll talk more about form design a little bit with proposals, but basically with these, you have text boxes, images, you have short answer boxes, free response boxes, date selects. You have all of these different elements that you can actually click and drag onto your form, and you can build out your form to ask your clients the questions that you want to get answers about. So a quick thing about lead capture forms here. The lead capture form is designed to go onto, let's say, maybe your social media account, to go onto your contact page on your website. This is a contact form that once somebody fills out this form, it's going to create a new lead project in your project section. We talked about leads yesterday, lead projects. And so when someone fills this out, you'll see a new lead project get generated on your projects page. Every time this gets filled out, you get a new project created in your account. Obviously, we don't want to be creating our projects manually all the time. We want it to be automated. And so a lead capture form is perfect for that. And we'll talk about sharing the lead capture form here in just a little bit. So we won't talk about all of the elements over here on the left-hand side because there's a lot of them that you can play around with, but there are just a few that I want to talk about here, specifically the short answer field here, or the short answer element. What this is designed for is you can ask a client a question and they can provide sort of a brief response, 3 to 5 words max. What this is great for with a short answer is asking things like first name, last name, email, phone. Obviously, when this is going to be the first form that people fill out in the overall process, we want to collect their contact information. So that way, when it creates them in Dubsado, we know what their first name is, their last name, their email, their phone. We're getting that basic contact information and really whatever qualifying information you need from them in order to create that new project. So as you can see, I have a few different short answers here to collect the partner's first name, last name, email, phone. So I'm using a bunch of different short answers to collect that information. Now, how do you collect that info? Well, let's look at this first name short answer. So when I click on it, over here on the left-hand side, you can tell it what question you want to ask. So I just have first name written there in the question. You can format it to ask whatever question you like, but where the magic happens is down at the bottom where you see field mapping. And what this does is you can tell this form whatever they write in this box, I want their answer to map to a certain place on the back end in my Dubsado account. So this is where you kind of play like a matching game. So in this short answer, when they type in their first name, I want that to get mapped to the client's first name on the back end. When you click this box here, you'll see all of these different fields that you can map to, like company name, address, phone number, state. There's all of these different things that you can map information to. So anytime that you want to collect something and map it, you'll use that short answer to bring in that information. So first name goes with first name. If I click on the last name short answer, that should be mapped to their last name. Same thing with email, same thing with phone number. So you can kind of see here, I'm basically taking whatever they put in on the form and I'm tracking it on the back end to create my client. This is where it's actually building that client for you. So that's really important, especially with a lead capture form, is collecting that information, that contact information from them. So you can use your elements to basically ask, whatever questions it is that you want to. We have date select elements where if you want to collect the date of their event or ask them, hey, what is your proposed date for this event? You can use a date select option there. There's drop downs where you can ask questions or check boxes if you want them to choose multiple things there. A lot of cool stuff you can do with your form building. Now, there's two more things that I want to share about your lead capture form before we move on to contracts. This is kind of future casting where you're headed in Dubsado, just so that you get an idea of what it is that you're working towards in Dubsado. I want you to kind of see the end goal here. We're not talking about workflows specifically during this boot camp, but I do want to put it on your radar so that you understand kind of what you're working towards. So remember, with our actual funnel here, Dubsado is responsible for interest all the way through providing the service. So what would be really great is that as soon as that lead capture form gets filled out and a new project gets created, if I could have my business process start automatically. And the good news is that you can attach a workflow to your lead capture. So that way, once someone fills out their lead or the lead capture form at this interest level, you can have a workflow get applied, and then it can start working through all of those different pieces that you want it to. So again, we're not going to deep dive into that, but I do want to put it on your radar that it's possible. What you can do is one of two things. In the settings on your lead capture form, you can apply a default workflow to start. So again, you would need a workflow built first before you can add it to this form, but you can apply a default workflow to this form. What that means is everyone who fills out this form, they get the exact same workflow process. It will automatically add that workflow in. What you can also do is you can use what we call a workflow element. And the workflow element is actually a question that you ask on your form that says, what service are you interested in, or what option are you most interested in? And when you do this option here, you can actually create different paths for your clients to go down. So I could say this option would be, let's just say wedding. This option could be engagement. And then this option could be anniversary. I know we talked about this yesterday. I spelled anniversary wrong. So with this, you can kind of get an idea that this lead capture form is really what kicks everything off. So if they come to this form, they could say, I want this and this and this. And then they could say, I'm a wedding client. And then a wedding workflow could kick in. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself there, but that's just an idea of where you're headed in Dubsado once you get into that automation and building workflows and whatnot. So, excuse me. So that's the first thing with workflows. The second thing that I wanted to talk about before we move on is sharing this. How can you get someone to fill this out? So what you want to do is over here on the left-hand side, you'll see the sharing tab. When you click on that, let's say you have your lead capture form ready to go here. There's two ways that you can share this form with a client or with a potential client to come into Dubsado. The first thing, you can click and copy this embed code, and you can put that into your website builder. So if you have a Wix website or Squarespace or WordPress or Showit or any of those website builders, you can actually embed this form on your website, probably under a contact page. So that way, when they come to your website, they can fill this out. Once they do that, it creates that new project for you. Another way that you can do it, which is becoming increasingly popular, is you can use the direct link. This is just a URL that you can post anywhere. So if you want to put this direct link in, let's say, your Instagram bio, if you want to put this link on your Facebook or in an email newsletter, if you want to put this link on, let's say, your email signature, maybe if you're sending something out to somebody and you want them to fill that form out, you could text message this link to somebody. When you copy this, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste it here, it will just open up the form in their browser and they can just fill this out as the client, and it will do the same thing. It will create that new project for you. So even if you don't have a website, you don't have to think to yourself, well, I can't use this form. You can absolutely use it. If you have a Pinterest page, you could pin it to one of your boards. There's a lot of different ways that you can use that direct link to have people fill this form out. So that's a really big piece of this getting people booked, is you want to have this form in a place where you can start collecting those new leads so you can start communicating with them. Now, one other thing here that I do want to point out with lead capture forms, and it's just a quick heads up, and that is if you are on a trial account with us, you will be maxed out at 3 clients. So that's how our trial works in Dubsado, is that it's not time-based. It's client-based. And remember what we talked about yesterday, a client is just a contact. So what this means is that if you have your lead capture form, let's say embedded on your website, and you're on a trial, once 3 people fill that form out, it won't work anymore. So I usually like to take a quick second and kind of give anyone who might be on a trial a heads up. We want you to be able to collect all the leads possible. So what I usually say is that if you're on a trial, use the direct link to send out your lead capture form specifically to people. So that way you don't have it embedded somewhere and someone tries to get into your system and you can't because you're maxed out on your trial. So that's just a quick heads up for anyone who's on a trial. If you're on a paid subscription, then you don't need to worry about it. You can get as many clients as you want into the system. But for trial people specifically, this is kind of a good thing to note so you don't miss out on any leads there. So the next thing that we're going to get into, we talked about lead capture forms. Now we're going to dive into contracts. So what we'll talk about here, let me go over to my forms, and we're going to go over to the far left and we're going to talk about contracts. Now, contracts in Dubsado, like what I was mentioning, are designed to collect an electronic signature from a client. So if you're using platforms like DocuSign or HelloSign or one of those systems, you could potentially just use our system. There may be some features in HelloSign or DocuSign that you might have to have potentially, but if you're just looking for a signature from a client, you can absolutely use our contracts here. So one other thing that's important about contracts is that you can only have one contract per project, one main contract, usually kind of your general terms and conditions. You can only have one contract per project. However, if you are wanting additional signatures, like what I was talking about, if you need more forms signed off on, you can use sub-agreements for those. Sub-agreements are perfect for collecting multiple rounds of signatures. So like design proofs, or if you want to do a contract amendment or anything along those lines, you can have as many sub-agreements as you want to inside of a project. So one main contract, as many sub-agreements as you want. So that's really important to know before we dive into the contract. So let's jump in here to the contract. And on the contract, what you're basically going to be using with your contracts are a couple elements here. You're probably going to be using text boxes, obviously, because the text box element is how you can actually put in your terms and conditions. So you can add in all of your clauses and all of that good stuff. You might use images on your contracts potentially if you want to put your logo or anything like that on there. But the two elements that are unique to the contracts and the sub-agreements are the signature area element and the initials element. So over here on the left-hand side, you'll see initials and you'll see signature area. Contracts and sub-agreements are the only two forms in Dubsado that have these two elements. So you can't put signatures on a proposal or on a lead capture form. They only can go on the contract and sub-agreement because they're designed for signatures. So on this form here, you'll notice that I have initials boxes on here, and this will make more sense tomorrow when we talk about filling this out, how the client experience works. But I have some initials elements on here after my different clauses. And then when I scroll down to the bottom, you'll notice that I have a space for clients to sign and a space for the business owner to sign. I'm using the signature area elements here, and this is how they can actually type in and sign their name electronically. Now, how you can split up the client and business owner signature is what you'll do is you'll actually just add two signature area elements on your form. But when you click into the, let's say the bottom one or whichever one you want to be for you as the business owner, you can tell it on the left-hand side, is this for the client to sign or is this space for the business owner to sign off on? So if you are a business owner that wants to countersign your contracts, you can do that. Just add a signature area element, designate it for you as the business owner. Then when a client's filling it out, they won't be able to sign on this slot because it's meant for you as the business owner. So we'll talk about countersigning contracts tomorrow when we get into the live experience of it. But one other thing that I want to talk about here when it comes to signatures, and then we'll start to move forward, is currently right now we don't have a way for you to have multiple client signatures on a contract. The reason why is because how we track the validity of the signature is actually using the IP address. So if you were to have a client sign off on this and then have someone else sign off on it, there's not really a way to distinguish that client A signed here or client B signed here. So we don't recommend attempting multiple signatures on here at the moment, just because from a security perspective, we don't have a way to validate it. But that is something that our team is working on, is providing a space for multiple signatures. So we don't have it yet, but it will be something in the future that will be implemented. So that is the signature area elements. The last thing we'll talk about with contracts, and then we'll move into proposals, is the smart fields. So we didn't really get into smart fields too much yesterday during our actual presentation. We talked about it a little bit during the Q&A at the end. What smart fields are in Dubsado is they are essentially little pieces of code, and you can see the different smart fields there in these brackets on the actual form. What they are placeholders, so that when you're using this contract with a potential client, it will autofill information about the client or the project. So up here, you can see where I have a smart field for the client's name. So I can use this one contract and I can add it to any project that I want to. And these smart fields are going to look at that client and project info specifically and autofill information about it. So I don't need to have a million different base templates for every client I work with. I can use one base template here, and when I add it into a project, it will autofill the information that I have. So something that's really popular on contracts are invoice smart fields. So if we click in here, you can add smart fields from inside this drop down. So there's project smart fields, client smart fields, but invoice smart fields, you can put in the invoice total. You can put in the invoice item names and amounts or descriptions. You can put in a lot of different invoice smart fields. And what that's going to do is take each individual project's invoice and put that onto the contract. So I can use one of these and it will autofill whatever the project or client info is. So I did want to talk about that a little bit. You'll see more of the smart fields tomorrow, but I just wanted to talk about those briefly here. Now, I'm going to take a quick pause, and actually I'll get into that once we get done with proposals. So let's just move forward here really quickly and tackle proposals, and then we'll be wrapped up for the day. So contracts we talked about, lead capture forms we talked about. The last thing we'll talk about today are proposals. And proposals are designed to pitch your pricing to a client, just like what I was saying earlier. This is really where you're going to send out your services and products to a client. They're going to look at what you offer and say, okay, I want this, or this quote looks good. And they're going to submit that proposal, and it's going to generate an invoice for you. So what we talked about briefly yesterday was we talked about the two different business models. Remember, we talked about packages where either you have standard set pricing for your services and products, or you do completely custom quotes. And what we talked about yesterday with packages is that regardless if you do standard set pricing or if you do custom quotes, packages are great for both. And the same thing applies with proposals. Whether you do standard set pricing or whether you do custom quotes, you should still use a proposal for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to all of my standard pricing and set pricing service people right now. And then I'm going to talk to the people who do all of the custom quotes. We're going to look at two different proposals and how you can take advantage of them regardless of which model you fall into. So let's start with the standard pricing for services and products. So I'm going to jump out of the form here and I'm going to go to my proposal, which is this fourth section here. And we're going to dive into my proposal. Now, I can talk a little bit more about designing proposals in the Q&A if people have questions about that. But for sake of time, I really want to get into the functionality of this because that's the most important piece beyond the design aspect of it. But as you can see, you can create really awesome proposals that are visually attractive to your leads. So that way, when you're trying to book them, they're kind of immersed in this experience of, oh, I'm working with this person, and it's not just a Word doc that you're sending out or a PDF. It's an interactive form where they can see, if you have a bio on your form or testimonials. This is really where you are pitching yourself to your client. You're trying to show off as much as possible on your proposal so that your clients want to purchase your product or service. So with proposals, specifically the standard pricing proposals, the main thing that you're going to be doing is using the package element over here on the left-hand side. So packages are exclusive with proposals. Just how we were talking about how signatures are exclusive to contracts and sub-agreements, packages are exclusive with proposals. You can only put packages on proposal templates. How I like to phrase it, and we'll actually kind of use a cool analogy here, is it's kind of like a restaurant where you have your packages as your food items and your proposal is like your menu. So basically what you're doing is you're taking your products and your services and you're putting them on this form so that when you send it to a client, they can pick and choose what they want, and they're basically building their own invoice here. So how you can do that is if you take a package element, you can click and drag and add it onto your form. And when you have it there, then it's going to say select a package. When you click the drop down, it'll bring up all of the packages that you have built. This is why we talked about packages yesterday, because I didn't want to get to proposals before we talked about packages first. Because as you can see, if you have your packages set up already, now I can just go in here and I can add in whatever package I want to. Now, I added the package in there, but technically right now there's black text on there, so you can't really see anything. So if you edit your package by clicking this little pencil icon here, you can actually highlight the text that's there. It's a little tough because I have a background image there, so it's hard to see. So let me switch this over to white here so you can actually see it. So with a package, when you add it in, it looks something like this. It has the package name. It has the actual price of the package in there. And what I'm doing, and whenever you add a package onto your proposal, what it's doing, you can kind of see here where you see these smart fields. It's pulling in package information. So the default smart fields that come in here when I first add in a package is the package name and the package total. So that's why you see that it says elopement package and then it has the package price in there. So what you can basically do is drag your packages into this form here, and you can organize it how you want to. But once it's in there, if you highlight your text, now you have some different formatting options. You can change the font, the size of the text, you can change the alignment, you can change the color, all of that good stuff. So let's say I do a different font and we'll blow it up to, let's say 18. So now you can see, you can kind of play around with the look of the package. You can also type in here if you want to. You're not just stuck with smart fields. You can type in here if you want to as well. But from a functionality standpoint, this is the main thing that you need to know is taking your packages, dragging them onto the form, and then adding your packages onto this form. So take your package element, drag it onto the form, and then add your packages in there. The other thing you can do is when you click on the package, over on the left-hand side, you can also swap out other packages. So if I want this one to actually be my traditional package, I can do that, and it will switch that out because it's pulling the package details in there. So that is how you add a package into a form. Now, if we scroll down, you'll see where it says choose any add-ons, and I have all of my add-ons down here. If you remember from yesterday, we talked about how packages are good for all of these things. They're good for your main packages. They're good for your add-ons, a la carte items, custom packages, which we'll talk about in a second. So all I did here, these are simply just package elements that I put on the form here. But all I did to visually change what you're thinking is I just added a text box and I said, choose any add-ons. In the background, all of these are packages, but it's just how I laid out the form that actually makes it where it looks like these are add-ons, but they're all just packages on this proposal. So the other thing here, I'll scroll down. You can also put GIFs on here because you can put background images and you can put images on here. So GIFs work on proposals. So you can kind of see here, it's really fun. You can spice up your proposals to kind of add in moving pictures and different things like that. So this makes it where you can really take advantage of the styling of a proposal and kind of craft it so it matches your branding. Now, the next thing that I'll talk about here before we wrap up are for all of my custom work people. So people who do your custom quotes, let's talk about adding in a proposal for your business model. So that was the standard package proposal. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a custom package proposal. What we looked at yesterday when it came to packages and custom packages is we talked about that special event catering package, if you remember from yesterday. When you are using a custom quote, all you're doing is adding one package onto your form here. That's it. You're adding in your custom base package that we talked about yesterday. So what I'm going to do here, just so that you can kind of see how this works, is I'm going to remove this package off of here, and I'm going to kind of show you how to implement it. So when I click on package, I'm going to drag it right here on the form. Actually, I'm going to put it above this here. So it's kind of in between. So when I add my one package element, I'm going to select my catering base package that we talked about yesterday. So I'll add that in there. And like I said, it's going to show you the package name and it's going to show you the package total by default. If you are using a custom quote, what I really like to do is use a different smart field than the package name and the package total. What I like to do, let me edit this here, is I'm going to highlight these and I'm actually going to use the package smart field, item names and amounts. And what this smart field does when I add this in there, and I'll click the checkbox, is it actually gives me sort of a package look or an itemized look of my custom package. So when I send this out to a client, I'm going to be able to customize this and tweak this to the client's preferences. And so all they'll need to do is just say, yep, this looks exactly like what we talked about, maybe on our consultation. This looks good. I'm going to submit this and move forward. We're going to talk about customizing proposals and all of that tomorrow when we get into the client experience part of it. But this is how you can actually build it. Now, one other thing that I like to do, and this will make more sense tomorrow, is when you go into your package, what I typically like to do is get rid of this select button. So just remove this completely. And what I like to do here, let me highlight this and delete it. What I like to do is I like to pre-select the package over on the left-hand side. So here's what's basically happening, and this will make a little more sense tomorrow. When I send this to the client and a client views this, all they will see is a submit button at the bottom. You can't see it right now because I'm not sending it to a client, but when a client gets this, they will have a submit button that they can click on the bottom. What I don't want to create, it's not a lot of friction, but it might be a little bit, or redundancy, is for them to click that select button and also click submit. That's kind of redundant. I just want them to click one button and move forward. So with this custom package, if I remove the select button, then they can't choose whether they want it or not. They can't deselect it potentially. But if I have it pre-selected in the background, that means that when they receive this proposal, this package is already selected in the background, but they can't unselect it or do anything to remove that select button. The only thing they can do is just click submit at the bottom. The last thing that I'll talk about with the quote proposal, and then we'll talk about a few more things and wrap up, is typically what I recommend with your custom proposal is somewhere on the form, you should have something that says, hey, if there's any changes that you want made to your quote, please just send me an email. Don't submit the proposal at the bottom, because what you'll find out tomorrow is that if they submit it, it's going to make that invoice with their custom package on there. I don't want them to submit it if they're not ready to move forward. So typically, and this is just kind of advice for anyone who's doing this, I usually like to put some type of phrasing. Hey, if you want any changes done to this, just send me an email. I can update the quote on the back end, and then you can submit it when we're good to go. So that's just a quick thing I like to throw out there. It really helps with the communication with the client about moving through that experience. So with that being said, let me jump back over here to Big Marker just so I can talk through a couple of these things. Now, up at the top where you see the handouts button, when we talked about this at the beginning of the webinar, if you click on that handouts button, you're going to see that there are links to the standard package proposal, the custom package proposal, and the contract. What you need to do if you want to use the templates that I showed today, what you need to do is first log into your Dubsado account so you're signed in there, and then underneath the handout section, click download, and it will take you to the link where you can copy these forms into your account. This is really great if you want just a good starting point. Maybe you looked at my forms and said, oh, these are really cool. I wish I could just use this template. If you click download, it'll take you to the link. and you can say copy to your account. Now, when you open up these links, the forms are not going to look like what I just went through. But when you click copy to your account, you'll see that it populates in there. So this is just strictly for you all, so you have a good starting point, and you can customize it and tweak it as you want to. Or if you want to start from scratch, you can absolutely do that as well. But we wanted to give you a starting point with these forms, because as you can see, there's a lot that you can customize with it. So those forms are for you. Now, the last thing that we'll talk about before we wrap up for the day is, of course, homework. So we talked about yesterday the different things that we'll do for homework. Today, what you'll want to do is 3 things, and you can kind of already tell what those things are. Create your lead capture form, create your contract, so bring in all of your clauses and all of that into your contract, and then create your proposal. Take those services and products that we talked about yesterday and either do your standard set pricing proposal, or you can do the custom proposal like what we talked about just a second ago. So regardless of where you fit, you should still be using a proposal, and that'll make more sense tomorrow when we get into the client experience aspect of it. So one other thing here, for those of you who are still on a trial, I wanted to give you all a discount code that gives you 20% off your first month or your first year with us. And that discount code is 3 days to paid. I'm actually going to paste it in the chat. So if you are on a trial with us, we do have a coupon code for you to get 20% off your first month or year. For YouTube, that's the number 3 days to paid. And you can use that to get 20% off your first month or year. Awesome. Well, now what we'll do is we'll move into the Q&A section. That's all I have for today. We just wanted to talk about those 3 things really, which is lead capture forms, contracts, and proposals. What we'll do is, if this is your first time, how I usually handle the Q&A is I will look in the Q&A section over on the top right next to the chat. You can click on Q&A and write in your questions there, and I will go through and answer as many as I can here over the next 15, 20 minutes or so. So let me look over here. Are you able to add animations, GIFs to forms? Would like to create more visual interest. So I did show that GIF that I put on the proposal. Let me jump back over there. And I knew some design questions would kind of come up here, but we'll talk about it. So on the proposal that I have with the GIF at the bottom, and let me drag this over so I can actually see the chat here. So all I did here with this actual GIF to put this in here is I used a background image inside of a container. That's the same thing that I did here with the container where you kind of see that background image. So this new form builder, what's really great about it is that there's 2 big things that really enhance the look of the forms: full width containers, and then also background images. So let me just show you what I mean here. If I click into the elements and I use my container element, I'll add that down here at the bottom. If you click on the container, what you can do is once you click on it, you can drag the container width to full width. That's going to give it that full width look that you see here. Then all you need to do is add in a background image, and it will be the background image behind this container. So when I scroll down, I have, let's say, this one. And so you'll see once I click on that, it adds that in the background. And now, as I add in my different elements and whatnot, so let's say I put in a couple images, and let's say maybe I add in, some project tracking, all that good stuff. It's going to be the background image behind all of my different elements. So what I did with this GIF image is that I just put it in as an image, and I have a text box here. And so that is behind the actual text. So that's all you have to do in order to use GIFs to kind of add some of those animations and those really cool things to your actual forms there. Let's see. Let me pop over here. Will Dubsado be updating the e-signature to be similar to functions of Adobe Sign and DocuSign? In contracts, is it possible to have verified e-signatures, not just a signature typed in? So I do believe that we're going to be expanding on the signatures, kind of like what I was talking about. We're going to be doing multiple signatures, and there's some other things that we'll add in there. As far as matching exactly what Adobe Sign does or DocuSign, that I'm not too familiar with all of their different features, but I do know that we are going to be expanding the contract portion of it, or the signing portion of it. Is it possible to send the contract and invoice together rather than in two separate emails? For example, I have a public proposal, then I want to send the invoice and contract as the next step. So Clarissa, that's a great question. We're actually going to be talking about that tomorrow. I will show you exactly how to do that. So make sure that you either attend the webinar tomorrow or watch the replay, because I'm going to show that tomorrow specifically. If I like the way I set up one form and want to copy and duplicate that section to another form, is there a way to do that? So there's not a way to copy and duplicate sections of forms, but if you want to, I'm not sure if this will work with what you're trying to do, but what you can do is you can duplicate the form itself, and then you can just eliminate everything off of that copy that you don't want in there. But as far as pieces of forms, there's not a way to duplicate those pieces and pull those over into other forms. The big reason for that is because, kind of like what we were looking at today, all of these forms kind of have different functionalities. So I can't copy a signature area element and, you know, my contract stuff and paste it into a proposal. So that's the main reason, is because some of these forms have specific elements that can't go into other forms. But that is a really great question. Let's see. Currently, I'm invoicing and creating receipts with QuickBooks Online. How would QuickBooks integrate with Dubsado? So we do have a QuickBooks integration. I'll talk about it briefly here, Shannon. So in the settings tab up at the top where we were yesterday, if you click on integrations, you can integrate your QuickBooks account. Now, I'll talk on this really briefly here on how it works. The integration that we have with QuickBooks is a one-way transfer. What it means is that all of your invoicing you'll do in Dubsado. So again, Dubsado is designed to do all of the invoicing and process the payments and whatnot. But how the integration works is that, let's say you send out an invoice to a client and they make a payment on that invoice, Dubsado will send that invoice and payment over into your QuickBooks account. It's just a one-way sync from Dubsado over to QuickBooks. Currently, right now, it doesn't go the other way from QuickBooks into Dubsado, but it goes from Dubsado to QuickBooks. Now, based off of your question, I would say that this would work really well, because if you are integrating from Dubsado over into QuickBooks, all of your invoices and payments and everything would already be in there. So if you're doing receipts over there, then it sounds like that actually would work really well for what you're wanting to do. So maybe integrating your QuickBooks would be a really nice idea there. But that's kind of just a very broad brushstroke of how the QuickBooks integration works there. Are you able to style and change the color of the buttons for the packages? So there's a couple things that you can do. Let me actually jump over to that form. So in regards to the select buttons, there's only a few things that you can do. If you actually click on the select, you can retype something different. So you could write in like purchase, and you can change what it says. So you can change the text on the select. And technically what you can do as well is you can change the color. So if you wanted to make this, I don't know, burnt orange, you can do that as well. But as far as the button color, you're not able to change that just from a Dubsado built-in native standpoint, because what you'll see tomorrow is that when someone selects the actual package, it's going to change it to your button color, but we'll get into that tomorrow. Now, there is something that you can do that's sort of outside of Dubsado if you really wanted to stylize your form more. What you can do is over on the left-hand side, you'll see the form styling tab. Now, this is for all of my people who are skilled in CSS and all the customization when it comes to styling and all of that. Technically, what you can do, if you want to take your proposal and elevate it even further than what you can do here, if you click on Edit CSS down there at the bottom, you can actually put in all of your styling that you want the form to look like. So if what we have doesn't work for you, you can go in and basically build out exactly how you want your proposal to look, including the buttons. So that's something that you can do if you really want to change the buttons to look exactly how you want them to. You can always use the custom CSS there. Next question. Can sub-agreements be used with vendors and subcontractors where the client maybe doesn't have to access it or have visibility to it? Yes. So what you can do, let me actually show you here. I'm going to jump over to the address book. So right now in Dubsado, we don't specifically have a way to, let's say, make a project for a subcontractor or identify who a subcontractor is just yet, or vendors. That's going to be something that comes in the future. But what you can do is this. Let's say that I have Angela up here at the top, and Angela is a subcontractor of mine. What I can do is if I click into Angela and I go over to the Forms tab, this is going to show all of the forms that I have ever sent Angela in all projects. So I only recommend doing this for this specific reason. I just kind of as a disclaimer, don't do this with your actual clients. Use projects for this. But for subcontractors and vendors specifically, what you can do is this. If you click this drop down, you can actually send two different types of forms here. You can send questionnaires and sub-agreements. You can't do proposals or contracts or any of those. Those are for projects. But technically, you can send forms from the address book if it's a sub-agreement or a questionnaire. So what I usually like to do with contractors, vendors, and things like that, I'll create, let's say, a vendor sub-agreement, and I can just send it through the address book. And now the client can't see it because it's just sent to this client directly or this contractor directly. The other great thing about this is after you do this for a while, you'll be able to see all of the sub-agreements that you have with this vendor. So that way you can kind of keep an idea of how many projects you've worked on them with. So that right now is kind of the workaround for it, but we are planning on putting in at some point an actual vendors feature. But for right now, this will work just the same. Just send your sub-agreements through the address book for your vendors. Let's see. How can you customize the link for the lead capture? Great question, Shay. So in Dubsado, if we go to the forms, and I'm just going to visually show everybody what you're talking about here first. So on your lead capture, if you go over to the sharing tab, like what we talked about, right down here, you'll kind of see that it's a hello.dubsado.com link. So what you can do, and there's two ways of doing this. Number one, and it's probably the fastest way, is you can run this through a URL shortener if you want to. So if you want to put this in Bitly or Genius or any one of those URL shorteners, you can use that and then just add this link to it. So that way it's more of like a Bitly link that someone can access. That's the quick way of doing it. If you want it to look like it's coming from you as the business owner from your brand, then what you can do is up at the top, if we go to settings, and then what we'll do is we'll go to, click on settings here. And what we'll do is we'll go down to domain names. And so when you click on domain names, you can set up your URL, and basically you can create a CNAME. You kind of have to go into your DNS settings and do some behind the scenes work to grab a CNAME, and then you can plug it in here. But this is where you can go to customize the URL and the subdomain that you want all of your forms and client portal to show. So again, there are kind of two steps to this. One, you kind of have to do on your end in your DNS settings. And then the other thing you can do is verify it here on this page. And then what will happen is inside the forms, whenever you're sending a form, so if we go to that sharing, you'll see that it has your CNAME and your domain name here as the URL. And also when you paste it and send it to somebody, it will be coming from your URL as well. So that's a really great way to make everything look like it's coming from your brand, is the domain names in the settings. Let's see here. Let's do a couple more questions. How do I update my calendar? How do I attach my calendar availability to a lead? So we won't get into schedulers necessarily for this webinar because that's kind of outside of what we're really looking at here. But basically what you'll do, I'll just explain it to you here, is with your scheduler templates, you're going to add a lead capture form to your scheduler. So in your scheduler template, underneath the advanced tab, you'll basically go down until you see additional form, and then you'll actually add in your lead capture to go with your scheduler. Because just like what we were talking about here, a lead capture form is what actually creates a project. A scheduler template can't create a project on its own. It needs a little bit of help. So in your scheduler template, go to the advanced tab, go to additional form, and then add your lead capture form there. Then when you share it, they can pick their time and then fill out the lead capture form, and then it will create that project with the appointment in it. So hopefully that makes sense there. Can you explain smart fields more? Yeah, let me briefly talk about smart fields here. So like what I was saying, we'll use canned emails for an example because it's the easiest way to understand how they work. So with a smart field, what it is, like I said, it's a code that you put in your emails or your forms as a placeholder. Then when you use it inside of a project, it autofills information. So let's just say I call this 3 days to paid, just so I know what it is. We'll just call this 3 days to paid. So what I can do is this, just to give you a really good example of this. Let's say that I wanted to create an email that basically is verifying their project date. So what I could do is this. I could say hello. And then what I'll do is I'll go down to smart field, and these are all of the different categories of smart fields that we have. But let's say I wanted to put the client's name in there. So I can say hello client, and I can autofill information that I've collected from the client. So I can say hello client first name, we'll put an exclamation point. And then I can say, I want to verify that your wedding date is, and then what I'm going to do is I want to autofill their project date. So I can click smart field project because I want project information, and I can say project start. So as you can see, it's putting in these little brackets here. Now what I can do, I'm going to save this just so you can see the power of this. So I have my little base template up here in my canned email section. I know we haven't really had a chance to dive into canned emails, but if I go into a project now, and let's say I jump into a sample project, if I click send email and I go down to this little bookmark icon down here, and I click 3 days to paid, there's my base email. When I click that, it's going to say, hello, Cameron, because I'm in this project. Hello, Cameron. I want to verify that your wedding date is August 1st, 2023. So it had those brackets in there. And actually what I like to do to visually show this is if I go back to that email, you can see that it takes that code and it autofills it here with that smart field. So it puts in that project info. Now what I can do is, let's say I go to a different project. Let's look at Mercedes here. So if I go to Mercedes project and I do the same thing and I click that same email, it's going to say, hello, Mercedes. I want to verify that your wedding date is February 10th, 2023. So the beauty of smart fields, whether you put them on a form, whether you put them in an email, is that you can use the same generic template, use smart fields to kind of autofill that information. And then that way you're not having to rewrite the client's name in every form, every email. It's going to look at the information that's available and it's going to autofill that whenever you send it out to a client. So hopefully that kind of explains what smart fields do as a whole. But there's a lot of different smart fields that you can play around with. Invoice smart fields. We talked about package smart fields, client information. It just autofills information that you have. Let's see. Can clients have a login to see where they are in their services? Potentially. It kind of depends on what you mean to see where they are in their services. We do have what's called a client portal where the client can log in to view all of their forms, invoices, contracts, and all of that. You can actually play around with the client portal right over here where you can send the client their client portal where they can log in and kind of see all their information. That's probably going to be about the extent of that, Chanel, is a place where they can log in to kind of see all their information. Let's see. Are you able to upload your own customized fonts? So at the moment, you're not able to upload your own customized fonts. But again, if you go to that CSS styling area, you can change the font to be whatever you want it to be. But like I said, you will have to kind of be familiar with CSS in order to do that. Let's see. How can we change the colors on your templates? Oh, the templates that I sent out. So let me jump over there to explain that. I think what you're referring to there is on the template that we have, like the cream color that comes on there. So if you go to the container, if you click on the container element at the top, you'll see the background color right over here. You can change this to be whatever color you want it to be to kind of match your brand. So if you want to grab that exact hex code that matches your brand, you can definitely do that there. Let me actually back out of this so it doesn't save that, because that purple, it's not the vibe. So, but that's how you can change that color on the form. Oh, it actually did save it. Well, that's awesome. Let me go down here and grab the hex code here, and then we'll just swap it out for the right one. There we go. So that's how you can change the color on there. That's a good question, Kyle. Let's see. Can animated GIFs only be in background images, or would I be able to add it as an element? So it's two things. You can either do a background image on there and make it the background image, or if you use just an actual image element. So if you click on image, and let's say I drug an image element on here, I could upload a GIF here, which I don't know if I still have that in my account. Let me see. I might have deleted it already. Oh, wait, no, it's right here. So I can do that if I want to and use an image element and put that on the form, or I can do the background option like what I talked about earlier. So either an image element, or you can use a background image. Either one works. Let's see. I presume you could have then multiple lead captures with different questions for different offerings. Yes. So with lead capture forms, you don't have to have just one. So in my example over here, you can kind of see where I have website contact form, internal referral lead form, Facebook lead form. You can have different lead captures that ask different questions, maybe one for wedding, one for anniversary. You could have one for one-on-one coaching, one for group coaching. You can have multiple lead capture forms if you want to. Let me talk about internal referral lead form for a second. With the internal referral lead form, what you can do, and sometimes people will do it this way, is let's say that I get a lot of cold calls, or I get a lot of emails from people that say, hey, can you send me more info on this? if someone is cold emailing me or cold calling me, I don't want to send them out a lead capture form to restate their name and email and all of that. So what I can do is I can actually bookmark this URL on my own computer. And then while I'm on the phone with them, or if they send me an email, I can fill this out as the client and it does the exact same thing. So you can use this internally if you want to as well. If you do get a lot of inbound calls or inbound emails saying, hey, I heard about you from a friend. This is my name. This is what I'm interested in. You don't want to send them a form to put in that same info. You just want to get right to it. So you can use an internal lead capture form by just bookmarking the URL on your browser and then just use it yourself. Okay, let's do one more here and then we'll have to wrap up. I know that we kind of went a little bit over time. We're a little bit over an hour, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time here. Is there a place where it specifies the best sizes to create the banner heading sizes for images? Yes. So in your actual form, let me go back over to the proposal. So what you'll want to do there, let me click on the container. So on the container, if you have a container on your form, right here in the background image section, you'll see that there's a little text piece that says images wider than 2500 pixels work best. So typically, like the image that I have here in the background, this is 2500 pixels long. So that's kind of the standard that I would recommend, is start with 2500 pixels and then you can kind of play around with it from there. But 2500 is the width there for full width containers. So let me see here. Let me answer one more question here because it says, question from yesterday's homework. Managed to create my first project. Excellent after yesterday's session with a real client and lead, and then use the invoice skills from yesterday to create an invoice and send it to the client. But I noticed that I couldn't send their invoice in the same email as the email. Is there a way to send it to them in one email? Let me see here. First project, I'm trying to see what you're referring to, Tiffany, there with, I noticed that I couldn't send their invoice in the same email as the email. Is there a way to send them in one email? So I'm not sure what you're referring to by them, but all you would need to do there, just in order to send your invoice, let me jump over to projects and maybe you can elaborate in the chat just a little bit more. With the invoices here, if you click send and then just do via email, you should see the invoice button populate if you're inside the invoice that you want to send out. Now, something else that you can do if you're talking about multiple invoices or more than one thing that you want to send out, the other thing you technically can do, I don't really have anything in this project. We're going to kind of talk about this tomorrow, so I won't get too far ahead of myself. But what you can technically do if you're trying to send out more than one thing is if you click send email in the emails tab and then click this little list icon is what I call it to the right of your canned email icon there, you can actually pull in multiple templates that are in your actual project. So if I wanted to add in, let's say, a liability waiver, and then let's say I wanted to add in the contract for this, can probably make some space there so it looks a little better. And then if you also want to add in, let's say, the invoice for it. So that's a way you can add in multiple things into one email. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to there, but that is, oh, I see you hit send email. So that's what you'll want to do, is just go to the invoices tab and do send via email from there. And then that will pull the invoice in for you, because then it will know what invoice to send out there. So perfect, perfect. Well, that is all that we have for today. Again, thank you so much for attending. We will be back here tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, same time, to actually pull everything together. So take today and tomorrow morning to put together your contract, your proposal, your lead capture form if you can. And then tomorrow we're actually going to go in and we're going to talk about how you can make the whole client experience work for you, what it looks like on the back end, what it looks like to the client, all of that good stuff. And then by the end of tomorrow, you'll be able to send out your proposal, contract, invoice, all that good stuff to your clients so you can start raking in all of those bookings. So have a fantastic rest of the day, everybody. And we will see you tomorrow at 1.